companions, after our midday rest, Manjolo and I headed back to camp in a wide arc to the south, and we approached the camp towards late afternoon from the southwest. And we were about a kilometer out when we found a human spoor. Now this was worrisome. A person walking around in the area, if they came across our camp, they could raid it and they could damage stuff. And in the worst case, we could be left stranded, and that could be fatal. This spoor was particularly worrying because it was no more than a few hours old, so it was made earlier that morning. And it was pointing in the direction of our camp. I looked over at Manjolo and I could see that he was also concerned. Now, I was very tempted to look around for more human sign, but I was too worried about the camp. And I said to Manjolo, let's hurry back and go and see. So we headed back as fast as we could, and we got into camp with the sun already amongst the trees, just above the horizon. Fortunately, we found the camp as we had left it, and this was a great relief. Now, we immediately scouted around the camp to see if we could find any evidence of human approaching, and we couldn't find any. Now, a little bit later, as I stood under the cold trickle of my bush shower, I thought, here I was earlier that afternoon thinking that it was going to be an uneventful afternoon, and now everything has changed. So later that evening, when we were ready for the night, and I was having my wine and Manjolo was sipping at his iron brew, I started thinking about what our situation was. Now, I've come across several different kinds of poachers over the years in the veld. The simplest and most common ones are what I call the protein poachers. And they poach around where they live, little village, or maybe some of them are semi-nomadic and they move around in the bush with their families. And they poach around where they live, and they use traps and snares and so on, wire snares mainly, to catch small game like hares and rodents and birds, and sometimes even a pig or a small antelope. Now, some of these guys wander out over longer distances and they stay in the bush for a few days to gather meat. It was quite possible that this spoor was made by such a person. But I've also come across what I call the hunting packs. Now, these are from bigger villages and even from towns, and they band together in large groups. I found a group of over 30 in the Tet district in Mozambique. They cover huge distances, 50, 60, 70 kilometers into the wilderness. And there they make a camp. And they hunt and snare around the camp until the area is depleted of game. And then they move on for 30 kilometers or so and they make another camp and they repeat. They are commercial poachers. So they dry the meat and they crudely cure the skins. And then once they've gathered enough, they send some of their number back to their village where the goods are stored. And of course, they carry on, and so there's a backwards and forwards transportation of dried meat and skins and so on. Once they return, they sell some of that locally to villages around them, and some of it finds its way into those tentacles of the illicit animal parts trade that reach right into the wilderness from the modern world. And they end up in muti shops and with roadside hawkers that sell to tourists. You'll almost always find that some of these guys are armed. It's an assortment of firearms, from old hunting rifles to semi-automatic rifles from the recent African wars to even homemade muzzleloaders. And some of them are absolutely ruthless killers. And if they found me or Manjolo in the bush, they wouldn't hesitate to kill us. They know they are far beyond the reach of ragged bits of the policing system that might wander into this area from time to time. And besides, once the scavengers had finished with our remains, nobody would ever find us, and nobody would ever be able to connect our death to them. It was quite possible that the track we found was made by someone from a group like that. Now, if that was the case, we would be in serious trouble, because they are super sharp bush people, and it's inevitable that they will pick up our sign within a day or two. Now, of course, there are other kinds of poachers too. There are these high-value animal parts poachers that sometimes are contracted, sometimes operate on their own, and they go for the high-value goods. They move in very fast, usually on inside information. They kill and they move out. It's possible that spoor was left by them because they operate in small groups, twos or threes. But we hadn't run into them, and they would avoid contact if they could. Their purpose is to get out as fast as possible with their loot. So if it was one of them, it was actually okay, because they would be long gone. And just fortunate not to have bumped into them, because that could be fatal. They are very dangerous too. Of course, there are other kinds as well, the ones that hunt from vehicles that come from army bases or from police posts or even from bigger towns. They drive quite long distances into the bush along tracks and roads, and they hunt from their vehicles. But it was definitely not made by any such people, because they stay fairly close to their vehicles. It was highly likely that the tracks were made by either a protean hunter or by a member of a hunting pack. It meant the same thing to us. Either ourselves or our equipment in the camp, or both, could be in serious danger. And it really meant that we had to leave. We couldn't stay here, which was really a pity, because there was a lot I still wanted to explore in the area. Now, I discussed this with Manjolo, and I was doing most of the talking, unfortunately. He couldn't really follow all of it, but he was nodding vigorously and saying, see, and is true. Anyway, I told him that tomorrow morning, unfortunately, we have to pack up, and we have to move further away from those villages on the other side of the Luyana that he thought existed. So next time, I want to tell you a little bit more about poaching in the wilderness. But this is getting a bit long, so I hope to see you again soon, and I hope you enjoyed this. Good luck.